Training camp is almost here officially for the Seattle Seahawks, and fans have plenty of questions heading into the 2025 season. Going to be diving into those with a special edition Saturday extended mailbag here on Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s tuning in here on this late afternoon or late morning, I should say, late Saturday morning. A special thanks to all of you. And I know I was supposed to do the second show last night. I'm in the process of moving. Schedule's kind of crazy, but as promised, going to dive into your questions here at Extended Mailbag. We are just 11 days away from the start of Seahawks training camp. And you, the valued 12s, have tons of Seahawks and NFL questions and maybe even some baseball questions sprinkled in there. So if you are watching this live show and haven't had a chance to get your questions in, just write one in the comments. I'm going to try to mix in some YouTube responses as well. Get as many questions in as we can here today for this bonus episode. It is brought your way by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, let's dive into the questions. Again, we've got tons of questions from you, our valued listeners. And we're going to start off with one here from YouTube to kick things off. Again, if you are watching live on YouTube, submit your questions in the comments, and I will try to get as many of those as I can, along with ones from social media on X and Blue Sky. Even have one from Instagram on here as well. So our first question, this one's coming from Seahawks 101. Do you think Damen Martinez can potentially be a punt or kick returner behind Tory Horton, Kenny McIntosh, or Ricky White, in case the Seahawks release Steven Sims and one or more of the others gets injured? So I think it would take a ton of things to happen for Damen Martinez to be in the mix to return kicks and punts. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't ever remember seeing him being a guy that was a big part of his game. Maybe he did return a couple kicks and punts in college, but I have not seen him doing any of those things during the drill work and OTAs, mandatory minicamp. I think on special teams, his best chance to get on the field is going to be on kick and punt coverage. And maybe he might be a guy that you could have out there actually as one of the blockers because of his physicality. There will be ways that he can get on the field on special teams. He's going to have to do that. I just don't know that I see him being a guy that is going to be an impact player as a return specialist compared to a lot of the other guys they have on this team who have done it a lot more. Some of them have done it really well in the NFL, like Steven Sims Jr. You have a guy like Tory Horton that had 3 punt returns for touchdowns in his college career. Maybe Martinez ends up slipping in there and makes a impact that I don't foresee, but I would be surprised if he's going to be involved in that capacity on special teams for the Seattle Seahawks. Next question here from Mike D on X. After hitting 1,000 yards last year, what does the ceiling for JSN look like in Klint Kubiak's offense? What do you think is the best case scenario? So this is interesting. I've talked about this a little bit earlier in the offseason after Klint Kubiak was hired. And we've hit on the running game aspect of this for months. Seattle is going to run the football. And as Abe Lucas said a couple weeks ago, it is non-negotiable. They are going to be elite at running the ball. That is going to be a primary focus for them. So I don't know that you're going to see the ball getting slung around the field the way that we saw, especially last year in Ryan Grubb's pass-heavy offense. So from that perspective, one could say it's going to be difficult for JSN to get back to 100 receptions. But I would argue in the case of JSN, the kind of player he is, this is a timing-based offense where there's going to be a lot of opportunities for possession receivers to be able to make quick plays. And that's a big part of JSN's game. I still think 100-plus catches absolutely is going to be happening this year. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets 110, 115, maybe even more than that, because I think Sam Darnold is going to be leaning heavily on him in this timing-based offense. I think where you're going to see the biggest potential dip, if he's getting that many catches, he's still going to get well over 1,000 yards, you would think. But I could see yards per reception going down a little bit, maybe not as many opportunities to win downfield. There will be some chances to do so. But to me, the ceiling this year is probably in that 115 catch range, 1,250, 1,300 receiving yards. Maybe he gets to double-digit touchdowns this year. I think if he puts those kind of numbers up, I don't know if he's an all-pro because there's so many really good receivers in the league, but it puts you at least in that conversation. And I do think his skill set with this style offense, it caters well to him getting a lot of touches, even if they're not throwing the ball quite as much as they did last year in Ryan Grubb's offense. So I think he's still got a chance to put up some really good numbers. And this also depends how much Cooper Kupp is able to contribute. If he's going out and getting 90, 100 catches, that's going to squeeze JSN a little bit. But I think that would be a really good development for Seattle if both those guys are making those kind of numbers in this offense. Arturo on Blue Sky. How would a 4-safety set impact Seattle's personnel on the rest of the defense? Who gets the short end of the stick? Oh, I love X's and O's questions. And this is a great question after the episode that we had on Friday with Nick Lee, just looking at this safety group. And so this would be if Nick Emani and DeAnthony Bell are out there with Julian Love and Kobe Bryant. And I think it is something we will see. Maybe not a lot, but I think it is something we will see for Mike McDonald with this football team, the safety depth, the talent that they have. And again, when you have guys like Kobe Bryant that can play in the slot, outside corner, Nick Emani can play in the big nickel role. He can play as a 2-deep safety, obviously in the box, his size. It gives you a lot of flexibility with what you can do. But I would think as far as personnel groupings, who's going to be the odd man out? If you are playing 4 safeties, you're still going to have your 2 outside corners. You've got 6 defensive backs minimum. It's going to be a dime set. Maybe you have a 7 defensive back set. We've seen Seattle do that before. They called it Bandit when Pete Carroll was here. But you're going to have at least 6 defensive backs in the field if you were doing that. So 11 guys on the field, you're looking at 4 down linemen and a linebacker, or 3 down linemen and 2 linebackers. So I would think Tyrese Knight is probably going to be the most likely guy that's going to sub out in those situations. You keep Ernest Jones on the field, and you're probably only going to have 1 defensive tackle, and you'll have 2 overhanging edges. It depends what kind of set that you were doing up front, but you could play bigger up there and have 3 defensive linemen and have Leonard Williams and maybe Mike Morris or somebody like that playing a big end position, and then have Hankins in the middle. There's a lot of different things that you could do. It's got me excited as a guy that likes the X's and O's aspect. But I think when you have several guys who can play in the box, but also can do the nickel roles and stuff, it does, against today's modern offenses, give you a lot of flexibility. But it does mean somebody's got to come off the field. Tyrese Knight probably in those situations would be the most likely. But then you're going to have to probably bring a defensive lineman off the field too. These are going to be utilized in pass-heavy sets where you're expecting the other team to throw the football, or it's in a situation where they're running no huddle. You're keeping as much athleticism on the field as you can. I think it gives Mike McDonald a lot of options. Scott on Blue Sky, knowing you love baseball, I think this is a great question. What would be the NFL equivalent of what Aaron Judge and Cal Raleigh are doing? So Aaron Judge, we've come to know what Aaron Judge is going to do. Like, the guy's already hit 60-plus homers this season. He's had a couple other years. He's been in that 40 to 50 home run range. He's just a perennial home run tanking beast. That's just what he does. But he's hitting in the I believe he's hitting 360 still. That is just insane. That would be, it's very similar to the year that Drew Brees had, that comes to mind, where he had over 5,000 passing yards, and he I think flirted with 40 touchdown passes. Like, you're talking like a high-profile slugger who is obviously one of the big faces of the sport, very similar to a quarterback in the NFL. He is one of the faces of baseball. You expect to see that. Cal Raleigh, on the other hand, like, yeah, we've had a couple 30 home run seasons. It's not like he came out of nowhere completely, but to have the season that he's having as a catcher, it almost feels like if the fullback came back in vogue as a rusher. Like, if you had Brady Russell at fullback and he suddenly randomly ran for 500 yards and like 10 touchdowns, like that, I don't know if that's quite the same dynamic, but it's just not something we've seen from a catcher going out and hitting like that. I mean, John L. Williams returning to the NFL and putting up big numbers as a rusher and a receiver, like that would be like, you're talking about a guy rushing for over 1,000 yards as a fullback now. Like, that would be unheard of in today's era of the NFL. But that's about the closest equivalent I can think of in terms of a position that you do a lot of real dirty work, just like catchers have to do, managing a pitching staff, and to get rewarded with a lot of touches. It's just not something that happens in today's NFL. So that is a really awesome question. Thank you, Scott. Our last question here for this segment, Dakota on X. Why is Kenny McIntosh never mentioned as a dark horse or a sleeper? He was great last year when he had a chance to play, but he just gets forgotten all the time. Well, I will say this. If you listen to our show regularly, and again, thank you to all the 12s who do listen 5 days a week, our everydayers, thank you so much. I have talked a lot about Kenny McIntosh over the course of the offseason, and even after Damen Martinez was drafted, as much as we love his upside, you can't forget about Kenny McIntosh because he averaged 5.5 yards per carry last year. And I've touched on this a couple times earlier this week. The Kubiak Shanahan style offense, there have been plenty of times where your most explosive athletic running back hasn't ended up being the one that's put up big numbers. And Denver in particular, in Mike Shanahan's time there, they had a fullback in Mike Anderson that rushed for over 1,000 yards. Alandis Gary, who wasn't the most explosive back, had over 1,000 rushing yards. Tatum Bell had a ton of success in that offense. And it almost felt like you could just plug any running back in there and they would find success. So it boils down to reading your keys and being able to have the ball carrier vision and being able to break some tackles. And if you've got 4.3 speed to go with it, great. But keeping that in mind, Kenny McIntosh has just always played faster with pads on than he did testing. He didn't test near as well as people thought he was going to. And so I think that he is a guy to very much keep on the radar. And one of the reasons I didn't mention him as dark horse is just, in my opinion, he's not a dark horse because I respect his talent. And I don't think that he's somebody that is being slept on in that building. I think they like all 5 of their top running backs a lot. So he's still got a lot that he's going to have to overcome if everybody stays healthy with what's in front of him. But at the same time, the way he ran last year and the fact you can put him out at receiver and he can do it, I mean, he has some skills that nobody else in this running back room has. So I think Kenny McIntosh is still in position that he could be maybe that sleeper that gets more snaps than expected. But I just don't, in that light, I don't view him that way because I respect what I saw last year. I'm just really excited to see this running back room and everybody get after it when camp opens here in less than 2 weeks. When we come back, hey, we're just getting started. We've got tons of questions in the mailbag. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to submit your questions as well. I'm going to be tackling some of those as we go through the show. Thanks for listening. We're going to be coming back with more questions here on our extended mailbag on our Saturday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I'm budgeting smarter and I'm saving more for other expenses that are popping up in life. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Like me, getting ready to move. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts. You can set goals and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Saturday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, sometimes even on Saturdays. We greatly appreciate it. Again, I know I was supposed to do a doubleheader yesterday, but I am getting ready to move, packing, got a little behind on it. But as promised, we've got our extended mailbag here, going to be answering as many questions as we can from you, our valued listeners. And make sure if you're listening on YouTube, if you didn't have a chance to submit questions earlier on social media or in the YouTube post that I had online on the channel last night, you can send your questions in right now in the comment section, and we got plenty of those that are coming in. So let's get to it. Part 2 here of our mailbag. Coming on X first here from Hawkstrologer. I've heard Nick Emani has a ways to go development-wise from becoming the player people talk about him being already. What are the 3 most important areas he needs to show improvement in this training camp? So this is just my opinion, and everybody's allowed to have their own opinions on these things. There's some well-respected people that know the game that are in that category where they're like, oh, I think Nick Emani's got a long way to go before he's going to be ready to be that impact player. I am not in that club. when I've watched this kid, and I watched tape from his freshman, sophomore, and junior year at South Carolina, so I got to see all those stepping stones. I see a kid that there are times where he doesn't take on blocks quite the way that you'd like to see him do. He's not a Cam Chancellor. This guy's not going to be knocking tackles over. That is not his game. But I think that it is underestimating his ability, saying that he is not a physical presence. There's a lot of good film there for this kid. So there's an area consistency-wise I'd like to see him be more physical, more consistently is what I would say. Instead of saying he's not capable, I think there's got to be more consistency from that aspect. I'm also curious to see where the positional versatility, the positional flexibility, where does it end with this kid? Because I am intrigued by the possibility with him being 6'3", 220. I'm intrigued by the possibility that he could be a player that you could occasionally move to the boundary and he could play as a boundary corner because I think he's got the physical tools. I mean, 4.32 speed. I think this kid can absolutely do that. But he hasn't done it at the college level. He has played some in the slot. I would need to see a little bit more consistency from him in regard to his spatial awareness and coverage in order to be able to do that. And so I think those two areas, his missed tackle rate went down the last 3 years. There's always room for improvement there, especially when you're going against NFL players. He's going to have to be more consistent with his wrap. But that's really the key word to me here. I think he's a more polished player than what a lot of people are saying coming into the league. I think he's far from perfect. He's a rookie. There's going to be areas that he's going to have to improve and develop to be able to be an impact player. But I think the physical tools he's got are not the only thing. This guy was incredibly productive in the SEC and does a lot of things really well. So I'm not on the fence or on the other side of the fence where I'm thinking this guy's got a long way to go. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he plays with a physicality standpoint when the pads come on. And I want to see what he looks like comfort-wise with all the different coverages, the mental part of the game that Mike McDonald is going to be throwing at him. And we saw the rookies last year. After you've been there for about 10 minutes, well, you're not a rookie anymore. You better figure it out. He's going to expect that from Nicky Manwari as well. So that's where I stand with him. And I just don't think that he is the project that a lot of people are suggesting that he is. Fear to Hawk on Blue Sky. Why do you think Cody White hasn't been able to find more than a spot contributor role? Is this the year that finally changes? So last year it was a numbers game a lot of the time because when he played in week 9 against the Rams, if fans remember, that was when DK Metcalf was banged up. So Metcalf was not suiting up in that game. And White at 6'3", 225, he gave them another receiver with size that could come in and try to fill that void. And he made some big plays in that game. But Metcalf comes back healthy. He still had Jake Bobo on the roster. Drake Young was a special teams guy. They just didn't have room a lot of days. He was the odd man out. I think this year that he has, I will say he's got a fighting chance, which is more than what he's had previously because DK Metcalf's not there anymore. And he's really, in terms of build, he's the closest thing the Seahawks have on the roster now. He is not the athlete that DK Metcalf is. But at 6'3", 225, he is the biggest as far as height and size that Seattle has in the receiver position. And he's a more explosive athlete than, say, somebody like Jake Bobo is by quite a wide margin. So I think that he at least has a fighting chance here. The fact that he's gotten first-team reps throughout the offseason program, at least the practices that we were able to watch as media, that suggests to me that he is in a better position than he has been. And he's been a good special teams player. We saw the blocked punt last year. So I definitely think that he is in that mix. And I would not be surprised at all if he does earn a roster spot coming out of training camp. But this also might be a guy in this stage of his career. Seattle's more comfortable putting him on the waiver wire, thinking they could get into the practice squad than they would be with, say, a Tory Horton or a Ricky White III that are draft picks coming in that they're going to be wanting to protect. So there are a lot of variables at play here to consider when it comes to Cody White and just his standing in that Seahawks receiving core. Micah Gaming on Blue Sky. What does Jaylen Sundell need to do to beat out Olu Oluwatimi, in your opinion? You know, I've kind of had to revisit this question myself several times over the course of the offseason because initially I thought, oh, this is going to be a 50-50. These two are going to be duking it out. And then early in OTAs, it felt like, well, it seems like Oluwatimi's really got this job under wraps. And he played quite well when he took over for Connor Williams last year. So at that point, I was thinking, well, Sundell's going to get some first-team reps because they want to give him those opportunities, but it doesn't feel like it's a competition Then you get to mandatory minicamp, and Sundell was not only getting quite a few center reps with the first team, he was playing some right guard with the first team offense. That got me thinking a little bit more, well, maybe this will turn into something. And I think the one thing that does give him a real opportunity here is just the athletic traits. And it's not that Oluwatimi is not athletic enough. I went back and looked at his pro day workout. His agility testing numbers were actually pretty darn good. And so that would suggest to you that Oluwatimi can more than handle this zone blocking scheme, even though that's not what he thrived in at the college level. But Jaylen Sundell is built for this with his athleticism. He is a 94th percentile athlete at the center spot, and he's played right guard, left guard. He's played tackle before. So from a depth standpoint, I mean, he's on this roster. He is going to be one of the linemen that's on the 53. But to beat out Oluwatimi, he's got to show that his athleticism gives him that much more of an advantage in this scheme over Oluwatimi. It has to be a clear and obvious benefit to having him out there over Oluwatimi. Is it possible? Sure. We'll just have to see. I would still say right now that it's Oluwatimi's job, though, if I had to make a guess right now. Let's get a YouTube question in here. And this one's coming from Big Cat 850. What position competition at training camp coming up do you think will end up with a surprising winner coming out on top of the battle? So I'm going to just piggyback off of a conversation that we had a little bit yesterday on our Blue Friday show when we were looking at dark horses. I still have a feeling, and I'm going to still go with Christian Haynes as my pick right now, but I have a feeling Satawa Lamea is going to get back into that right guard competition. And I would not be surprised at all if he does what he did last year. And look, this is a kid that is beloved in the facility. The coaches love him. They gave him that opportunity to start last year because they felt that he had put the work in to get that chance. He had his issues in pass protection, was very up and down roller coaster, but the team undoubtedly was much better running the football with him in the lineup. He's athletic enough to handle the wide zone and the responsibilities getting out as a move blocker. He can do those things. And I think there's some nastiness to his game. We saw a pancake on Zach Charbonnet's 50-plus yard touchdown in Arizona last year. He will finish. And John Benton, I think, is going to be intrigued by this kid. And I've heard some things from people in the building that suggest that Lamea is somebody that this new coaching staff really likes. So I would not be surprised at all if he gets in the mix there at right guard. And I don't know what happens there with the other players. Does Anthony Bradford fade out of this because of the lack of fit? I mean, we'll have to see. I was surprised he was getting all the reps he did during OTAs and minicamp, but clearly John Benton and the staff, they wanted to get a look at him, and he does have better testing numbers than you would think with a guy of his size. He looked like he was a little bit better in shape as well. So there's a lot of dynamics at play at that right guard spot, but I think Lamea could be a surprise there to keep an eye on. All right, Sea Cyclones on Blue Sky. You mentioned a good 2025 season for Marquez Valdez-Scantling would be 650 yards, which I agree with. Assuming that this happens and no major injuries happen to JSN or Cup, what would be an excellent year for Tory Horton on offense? Well, if all three of those things happened where Cooper Kupp and JSN are healthy and they're very productive, as I mentioned, 85, 90 plus catches apiece, and you somehow got 600 receiving yards, 650 receiving yards out of MVS in this offense. I don't know that it would necessarily even be saying anything about Tory Horton. I would just be surprised that he gets anything more than 200 or 250 receiving yards because there's only one football to go around, and I just think this team is going to run the ball a lot more. I can't see four receivers going out and have really solid seasons, and maybe he gets you 300 and there's a little bit more of a balancing act. But I do think if you're getting those kind of numbers from MVS, it's a good thing. It's good to get those explosives because that's what he's going to provide your offense. And you're having healthy seasons for Cooper Kupp and JSN. They're productive. One football going around. You've got tight ends to feed as well. I think they're going to be a big part of the passing game. I just don't know that Tory Horton's going to get the opportunities in that case. I would expect he's going to have more of a chance to splash on special teams in that instance as a kick and punt returner, because right now, to me, he would be the favorite to win that punt return job, assuming that he's fully healthy. That's going to be the big question going into training camp. When we come back, hey, we've got one more segment. We got more time to answer questions. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to get those questions posted. I'll answer as many as I can. We'll come back with an extended Saturday mailbag edition of Locked On Seahawks. We'll return here in just a moment. Welcome back to the Saturday edition of Locked On Seahawks Extended Mailbag Edition. I can't believe that we are less than 11 days away from the start of training camp. I'm fired up, but I can't believe that we're that close to training camp beginning at the VMAC. So without further ado, let's get back to our questions here. Tons of questions from you, the Value 12s. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, didn't have a chance to submit a question, but you have something you'd like an answer for, go to the comments section and I will tackle as many of those as I can. Let's do a question here from Charlie the Unicorn. Will the Seahawks increase their use of dime coverage in 2025? Similar defenses have ran dime more often than Seattle did in 2024. So kind of going off the earlier question about, getting four safeties on the field, that's not the only way you can do dime. They could have extra corners on the field as well. And Seattle's got the positional flexibility and the depth to be able to do either one of those things. So yes, they are going to be running a lot more dime. And I think what really fascinates me from a play calling standpoint, being somebody that really is an X's and O's nerd, I love looking into different schemes and different blitzes and different variants of coverages, what they're going to be able to do from a blitz and sim pressure perspective with these different lineups, having guys like Nick Emani that you can now plug in, they can move at different spots that have been good blitzers. Obviously, Devin Witherspoon, Kobe Bryant has been an effective blitzer when they've used in that capacity. They're going to be able to bring pressure from everywhere and really mix those in. And sometimes it isn't even going to be a blitz because they've got guys up front that they're comfortable dropping back into coverage, doing some zone blitzes, sim pressures. I am really excited to see that. So, yeah, to answer the question, they are definitely going to be running a lot more dime. If they're not, I think Mike Macdonald's missing out on a huge opportunity to really maximize on the talent that they have put together in that secondary and just in this defensive personnel grouping in general. So I think last year, a lot of it had to do with the fact there was, they were sorting things out with this defense, trying not to put too much on the plate of these players in year one under Mike Macdonald. And then you had some guys like Rayshon Jenkins that got hurt. I think there were some things that really limited what Mike Macdonald could do. If you keep this group healthy, that's always the X factor here. Got to have a clean bill of health. But absolutely, they will be running a lot more dime, not, out of necessity. They're going to be doing it because this is what they should be doing to take advantage of the group they have and just all the wrinkles that Mike Macdonald can mix in to make life tough on opposing offenses. And most importantly, confuse opposing quarterbacks and who's going to be coming in different things like that. Can't think of a name on YouTube. Again, I love it when this guy sends questions in. With the abundance of offensive linemen that the Seahawks have from the past few drafts, do you think it is likely one of them could be traded instead of outright released late in camp? I think it is possible that this could happen in large part because two reasons. One, John Schneider's talked about this a lot, and I know fans hate when this answer gets brought up, but there's truth to it. There is scarcity with offensive linemen more so than any position in the NFL. Maybe quarterback you can put in there too. I mean, there's only so many guys that can play great high-level quarterback at the NFL. But offensive linemen, it is really hard to find quality offensive linemen. Most teams in the league are hurting at one or two spots minimum up front, and they're looking for upgrades because there is a scarcity of talent at the offensive line. And any given year, you might have 3 or 4 teams that have good offensive lines. You're going to have a bunch that are average. There's going to be a bunch that aren't good just because of scarcity. So, and again, you add an injury in there, then you might have teams calling that are a better fit for Anthony Bradford as a downhill blocker. Hey, we'll give you a late day 3 pick for him. So I think that that's possible. Christian Haynes, if he's beat out, there might be some teams that are intrigued by him with what he did at UConn in college and his athleticism. Maybe you could move somebody like that. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's impossible. I don't know if that ends up happening when we get into the dog days of training camp and Seattle starting to figure out the offensive line. But I do think that with the youth they've got, these are very young players that are still developing, that are on rookie deals. And the fact that there is such a dearth of offensive line talent across the league, and teams are always looking for upgrades, I do think there's a chance that they could move one of these guys potentially. If they don't win a starting job or a number 2 job, they could move one of them and open up that log jam they've got a little bit and get some draft capital for next season. Natasha on X, after Spoon and JSN, which 2023 draft pick is most deserving of a new contract? So right now, I would say Derek Hall would be the first one that comes to mind. even though he had no sacks his rookie season. Last year he had 8. And late in the year, he seemed to fizzle out a little bit. I think some of that was he was not, he hadn't played that many snaps in a 17-game season in his career. I'm expecting him to take that next step here in Mike McDonald's defense in year number 3. And I just think Seattle, with the situation they're in, we don't know what Nwosu's future looks like because of the injuries he's had. This is truly a make it or break it season for him. DeMarcus Lawrence had a 3-year contract, but he's 33. And there's a pretty good chance he's not getting through that 3-year deal in Seattle. So I think Derek Hall can be one of those building blocks on this defense, especially if he takes another step forward. They might try to get him locked up next spring if that happens. Even with Boye Mafe now heading towards free agency, maybe those two both, you can bring them back at the right price. But I think Derek Hall would be next. And then, look, Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker III being a free agent this upcoming year, it's no given that he's going to be coming back because he's had injuries. His production has not been there the last couple of years. Line has obviously impacted that, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Zach Charbonnet's played well when he's had his chances. He's got 2 years left in his deal. If Ken Walker III's gone, maybe Charbonnet ends up being the guy that gets a second contract. And then Olu Oluwatimi, if he's your starter at center this season and he plays as well or better than what he did the second half last year, Seattle would be crazy not to try to get something struck there for him long-term with the lack of continuity they've had at that position, playing musical chairs since Max Unger left in the Jimmy Graham trade. They need to get production at that position. They need continuity. So those are the 3 guys in that order. I would say Derek Hall, Zach Charbonnet, and then Olu Oluwatimi. Those are the ones to me that would be next in line, and that could shuffle depending how this year plays out. If Oluwatimi goes out and borderline plays like a Pro Bowler, go get that deal done now. You need to get a center long-term and end this musical chairs game that you've been playing for a decade. So I think there's obviously going to be some variance to that depending on what happens this year. But those would be the 3 names that would make the most sense to me. Our last question here to cap things off. This one's coming from Ori on Blue Sky. Again, a thank you to the Blue Sky listeners. We got tons of questions from you on Blue Sky, continuing to develop more of a presence over there on that platform. And this is sticking with the edge rushers. Do you think the Seahawks are taking too big of a gamble if they decide not to re-sign Boye Mafe or Riq Woolen going into the final year of their contract? It's risky. There's no question about it, but I think you have to, that's what makes being a general manager a hard job. Like, I don't envy John Schneider with the decisions that he has to make. Boye Mafe, I've wrote an article about this on Emerald City Spectrum. Make sure to check that out, emeraldcityspectrum.com. Looking at some comparables in terms of guys his age that have signed new contracts in the last 5 years. And a lot of those players had more production, but it was closer than you would think. And Boye Mafe had some areas that he really did well compared to these guys that got paid. That told me, well, he's probably looking at 15, 16 million a year as things stand right now. And he's never been a double-digit sack guy. So John Schneider might be sitting like, I don't know if I want to do that. And the risk there is if he goes out and gets 11, 12, 13 sacks, Frank Clark 2.0 might happen for you. And you're like, well, I don't want to pay $23 million a year for Boye Mafe. Maybe we do a franchise tag and try to see if we can move him. You get into that cycle again where it becomes difficult. Seattle's got the money to be able to make a move like that, but John Schneider might not want to spend that money. And then in the case of Riq Woolen, consistency is really the theme of this episode. Consistency has been the thing there. We've still seen production. I mean, he had 3 interceptions last year, double-digit pass breakups. The tackling numbers actually improved last year in terms of missed tackle rate. So you saw some things that improved. I just think Seattle is still kind of in that spot. Well, but we want to see more with the physical tools you have and what we saw your rookie year and the fact that he's had those lapses that have led to brief benchings. I think there's still some things the Seahawks want to see from a maturity standpoint before they're willing to spend money. But again, he goes out and gets 5-6 interceptions again with his sub 4.3 speed. Somebody's going to be throwing a lot of money at him next spring, and you get Devin Witherspoon's contract coming up. Seattle's probably sitting there like, oh, we can't pay both these corners this kind of money. So I don't blame John Schneider if they go into the season with those 2 guys not being extended. If they haven't made any efforts to try to do that, though, and see what the price point is, and I don't think that's the case. I'm sure John Schneider's had these discussions with the representatives for both Boye Mafe and Riq Woolen, but if they have not had those discussions to this point, then that would, to me, be bad business. That's malpractice. But I can understand not overpaying based on what we've seen. It's not one of those areas where, like, this guy, we just got to get it done right now. I feel that way with Charles Cross because he's still a really young tackle, and I just like his fit in this offense, and he's gradually gotten better every year. I think that breakout season's coming. Left tackles are hard to find. I'm more in the party that he needs to be the one you get done now. If you get Mafe or Woolen, you're confident they're a part of your future, go get them signed. Then I get that, but I can understand maybe why there's some reservations. Well, and again, that's why John Schneider has that job, and I don't envy him at all having to make those decisions. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, we're going to have Stacey Ross of Seattle Sports joining us as we continue our training camp preview series. Going to be checking out some of John Schneider's decisions this offseason and how it may play out in training camp, getting our first look at evaluating those decisions. Again, 4 p.m. Pacific time on Monday live. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go Hawks.